Okay, so today we're diving into a sermon that's, it's got it all. Faith out, an epic battle for freedom, even a touch of divine intervention.
It's pretty powerful stuff.
It really is. We're taking a look at Evangelist Locke's Heaven Will Fight for You.
And what's so fascinating about this sermon is how she takes this story that's thousands of years old, right? This
No.
story of the Israelites battling for their freedom and makes it feel so relevant to the struggles that we're all facing today. Even if you're not particularly religious, it's hard not to connect with that universal feeling of just being overwhelmed by life's challenges.
Right, like we can all relate to feeling like we're facing impossible odds.
Exactly. And the sources you've gathered for this deep dive excerpts from the sermon itself, the biblical verses from Judges chapters 4 and 5, and even that interesting reference to Ananias and Sapphira, they offer this really multi-layered understanding of her message.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Evangelist. Locke starts by throwing us right into the action. She paints this really vivid picture of the Israelites living under the oppressive rule of King Jabin. For 20 years, they've been crying out for freedom. Can you even imagine that level of despair? 20 years of feeling completely trapped.
And that number 20, it's not insignificant. In biblical numerology, 20 often represents a period of testing a crucible, if you will, where faith is purified through suffering. Think about Jacob laboring for 20 years before gaining his freedom, or even the Israelites wandering in the desert for 40. It's like there's this universal pattern of struggle that precedes any kind of profound transformation.
It's almost like we need that pressure, that sense of being squeezed to really discover our own inner strength.
It's a powerful concept. And in this case, the Israelites are at their breaking point. Evangelist Locke doesn't shy away from the rawness of their despair. She compares it to the anxieties and the fears that we wrestle with in our own lives today.
It's true. She talks about how wrestling with self-doubt can be just as terrifying as facing a real enemy.
Absolutely.
And in this case, the Israelites are up against an army with 900 iron chariots. Can you imagine?
I can't even imagine.
The sheer terror of seeing those things thundering towards you, knowing that you're completely outmatched.
It's a powerful image for sure. And I think that's where Evangelist Locke's message goes beyond just a history lesson. She's really talking about the battles that we face every day, those battles that aren't fought on a physical battlefield, but within ourselves. That internal struggle with our own fears and insecurities.
Right. It's like our own minds can be our own worst enemies sometimes.
Yeah.
We magnify our problems. We get stuck in those what-if spirals, and suddenly everything feels impossible.
And we look for proof, don't we? We look for something tangible to cling to, something to bolster our belief, especially when things feel impossible.
It's like we need someone to look us in the eye and say, yes, you can do this, even when we don't believe it ourselves.
Right. But what Evangelist Locke seems to be saying here is that real faith, true faith, requires a leap. A willingness to believe even when everything around you tells you not to.
It's like taking a step off a cliff and trusting that you'll sprout wings on the way down.
Exactly. And that's where Deborah comes in.
Okay, so tell me about Deborah. Who is she in this story?
So Deborah is a prophetess, but she's not just a prophetess. She's also a judge, a leader who emerges during this time of crisis for the Israelites and demonstrates incredible courage.
So she's like a spiritual warrior queen.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that even Deborah, with her direct connection to the divine, she acknowledges the very human need for support.
So even the strongest among us, even those who seem to have an inside line to God, they still need someone to have their back.
Absolutely. We all need that. And that's where Barak comes in.
Okay. And who is Barak in all of this?
Barak is the military leader chosen to face Sisera, the leader of King Jabin's army. He's a strong and capable warrior, but he also experiences doubt. He's got this great line where he says, if you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I will not go.
He sounds like he needs a little bit of a pep talk.
Well, he's about to get one. Because Deborah, with her unwavering faith, she gives him this incredible prophecy. She basically tells him, get ready, because God's about to do something amazing, but it might not look the way you expect.
Oh, I love when that happens. When we think we've got it all figured out and then boom, God throws a curveball.
That's exactly what happens here.
All right, so tell me, what does this earth-shattering prophecy entail? Okay, don't leave me hanging. What's the prophecy?
She tells him, the path you're on won't lead to your glory, Barak, because the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman.
Whoa. Talk about a plot twist. So she's basically saying, step aside, boys, a woman's got this.
It's a powerful statement, especially in that cultural context.
Yeah.
And remember, this is thousands of years before the idea of girl power would even be a thing.
Right. So it's not just about military strategy. It's about trusting in a power that operates outside our limited understanding.
Exactly. And this theme of unexpected victory plays out even more as the story unfolds because it's ultimately another woman, Janelle, who brings down Sisera.
We'll definitely come back to Jael's story in a bit. But first, let's talk about that moment when Barak, armed with Deborah's prophecy, leads the Israelites into battle. What happens next?
Well, Evangelist Locke describes this incredible scene: the Israelite army, 10,000 strong, facing off against Sisera's forces. She really emphasizes the stark contrast. On one side, you have these mighty iron chariots, symbols of military might, and on the other, you have this ragtag group of Israelites, many of whom are starving, exhausted, completely outmatched in terms of weaponry.
I can't even imagine the feeling of looking out at a battlefield and seeing those iron chariots thundering towards you.
It's a classic David and Goliath scenario, right? And I think it highlights the immense faith it took for them to even show up that day to face those odds.
Right, because they're not just facing a physical enemy, they're facing their own doubts, their fears, that internal voice that says, you can't possibly win.
It's a reminder that true faith isn't about the absence of fear or doubt. It's about choosing to trust, even when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to run for the hills.
That takes serious courage. And I think that's what makes this story so relevant. We all face those moments, those metaphorical iron chariots in our own lives, those challenges that seem so big, so overwhelming, that we're tempted to give up before we even start.
Absolutely. And it might be a financial crisis, a health challenge, a relationship falling apart, whatever it is. It can feel like those iron chariots bearing down on us.
So how do we tap into that same level of faith that the Israelites found? How do we face our own iron chariots with that same courage and trust?
Well, that's where Evangelist Locke points to this incredible moment in the story, a moment where it seems like heaven itself rises up to fight for the Israelites.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. This is the part where things get really epic.
Oh, absolutely. She describes how the stars themselves fought against Sisera, how the river swept away his chariots, how even the weather turned against him. She's drawing directly from Judges 5:20 here, where it says, "From heaven the stars fought, from their courses they fought against Sisera."
Wow, it sends chills down my spine just hearing those words. But how do we even begin to understand such a powerful image? I mean, were the stars literally shooting down lasers at the Canaanite army?
Well, like most things in Scripture, it's open to interpretation. Some people might interpret that passage literally, believing that God intervened directly in the natural order to bring about Sisera's defeat. Others might see it more metaphorically as a poetic way of describing the overwhelming sense of divine favor and support that the Israelites experienced that day.
So whether we take it literally or figuratively, it's clear that something extraordinary happened that day, something that shifted the balance of power and allowed the Israelites to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds.
Absolutely. And you know, it's interesting because even after witnessing this incredible display of divine power, Sisera still manages to escape the battlefield.
Yeah, what's up with that? Why wouldn't he be instantly defeated? It seems like a bit of a cliffhanger.
Well, that's where the story takes yet another unexpected turn, underscoring this idea that deliverance often comes from the most unexpected places and in the most unexpected ways.
Okay, now I see where you're going with this, Javelle. You mentioned her earlier. She's the one who ends up taking down Sisera, right?
Exactly. And not just any woman, mind you. She's the wife of a man who is actually allied with King Jabin.
Talk about awkward. So how does this all go down?
So Sisera, fleeing for his life, stumbles upon Jael's tent, and she invites him in, offering him shelter and hospitality. He thinks he's found sanctuary, a safe haven from the chaos of the battle.
He obviously underestimated the power of a woman scorned. But on a serious note, what I find so fascinating is how Evangelist Locke uses this whole scenario to highlight the unpredictable nature of divine justice. It's a reminder that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, often in ways we could never have imagined. That's so true. It's like we get so caught up in our own plans, our own limited understanding of how things should unfold, that we miss the miracles happening right in front of us.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes we need to surrender our need for control, to let go of our expectations and trust that a higher power is at work, orchestrating events in ways that we may not fully comprehend.
So it's fascinating how this story unfolds, right? You've got this epic battle, divine intervention on a cosmic scale, and then suddenly, bam, Evangelist Locke shifts gears and tells this seemingly unrelated story about a couple named Ananias and Sapphira. It feels like a total plot twist. How does she connect those dots?
It's actually brilliant the way she weaves those narratives together. She uses the story of Ananias and Sapphira, this couple who basically lied about their charitable giving, as a stark contrast to the Israelites' unwavering faith.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. What happened with Ananias and Sapphira? And how does their story tie into the Israelites' victory?
So in the book of Acts, we read about this couple, Ananias and Sapphira, who sell a piece of property and then publicly declare that they're donating all of the proceeds to the church.
Okay, sounds pretty straightforward so far. What's the problem?
Well, the problem is that they secretly hold back a portion of the money for themselves. They try to appear more righteous than they actually are.
Oh, so it's a pride thing. They want the recognition but aren't willing to fully commit.
Exactly, and their deception doesn't go unnoticed. Peter, one of the apostles, confronts them, and they both drop dead on the spot.
Whoa, that's intense. But I still don't quite see the connection to the Israelites.
Think about it this way. The Israelites were facing impossible odds. They had every reason to doubt, to hold back, to cling to their own limited understanding of how things should be, but they didn't. They surrendered their fear, their need for control, and put their faith in a power beyond themselves.
Okay, so you're saying that Ananias and Sapphira represent the opposite of that surrender. They were clinging to their possessions, trying to control the narrative, and ultimately their lack of true faith had devastating consequences.
Precisely. And this is where Evangelist Locke's message goes beyond just a feel-good sermon. She challenges us to examine our own lives. She asks us, what are we clinging to? Where are we holding back? Are we willing to surrender our need for control, our attachment to material possessions, our limited perspectives, in order to fully embrace the miraculous possibilities that open up when we put our faith in something bigger than ourselves?
That's a powerful question, and it's so relevant to the struggles we face today, even if we're not facing down literal iron chariots. So often we're taught to strive, to achieve, to accumulate more, more, more. But what Evangelist Locke seems to be suggesting is that true freedom, true abundance, comes from letting go.
It's a radical idea, isn't it, to find freedom in surrender, abundance in letting go.
It really is. And what's amazing is that Evangelist Locke delivers this message not with a preachy tone, but through this incredibly immersive, engaging storytelling. I mean, you can practically hear the clang of those iron chariots,
Right.
feel the desperation of the Israelites, and then experience that wave of relief when the stars themselves seem to fight on their behalf. And then she brings it all back around to our everyday lives, our own struggles with faith and doubt, and the things we cling to that prevent us from experiencing true freedom.
It's a message that stays with you long after the sermon is over. And as we wrap up this deep dive into Evangelist Locke's Heaven Will Fight for You, it feels less like a history lesson and more like a call to action, a challenge to examine our own hearts and ask ourselves, do we have that same unwavering faith? Are we willing to step onto the battlefield of our own lives, armed with the courage of our convictions, trusting that even when we can't see it, even when we doubt, a power greater than ourselves is fighting for us, guiding us towards victory?
It's a question worth pondering, and I have a feeling we'll be unpacking this sermon for quite some time.